Who gave you permission to sell a stolen recipe? Nathan Cole's voice cut across the elementary school gym as he dropped a black corporate pastry box beside Caleb Brooks's dented tin. Parents turned. Victoria Lane froze with a bitten square in one hand. Ruby, 9 years old and trembling, lifted a stained recipe card inside a clear plastic sleeve. Nathan reached for it. Caleb stepped between them. "That's my mom's recipe," Ruby said, and the serving spoon hit the floor. 47 minutes earlier, the gym had smelled of vanilla frosting, floor wax, and coffee poured from silver dispensers beneath a banner that read Community Bake Sale. Fluorescent lights buzzed above folding tables dressed in bright paper cloths. Children moved between them carrying handmade signs, while parents arranged glossy cupcakes beneath strings of red, white, and blue pennants. Caleb entered through the side doors with his brown apron folded over one arm and the dented tin balanced against his chest. Ruby walked beside him, guarding the clear plastic sleeve with both hands. Her pale red hair had been tied back with a blue ribbon, though one loose strand already curved across her cheek. "Easy," Caleb said when she nearly hurried ahead. "Your mom's card has survived 10 years. Let's not let a gym floor be what finishes it." Ruby smiled, but her fingers tightened around the sleeve. The card inside was yellowed at the edges. Blue handwriting crossed its surface in careful lines, with a darker stain of cinnamon near the bottom and one correction written in red ink. Caleb had read those words so many times he no longer needed the card to make the recipe. He still brought it because Ruby had asked. She wanted people to see that the orange cardamom squares had belonged to someone before they belonged to a bake sale table. Caleb set the tin down long enough to steady a first grader whose sneaker had caught on an extension cord. Then he crouched, pressed the cord flat beneath a strip of loose tape, and moved a warming tray farther from the aisle. No one thanked him. He did not appear to notice. Across the gym, Meredith Collins stood beside Principal Harold Finch with a clipboard held against her. Cream-colored coat. She was smiling as she greeted donors, but the smile changed when she saw Caleb. It became smaller and more controlled, the kind adults used when they wanted children nearby to believe nothing unpleasant was happening. "Mr. Brooks," she said, glancing at his old tin and flower-marked work shoes. "You're later than the sponsor vendors. We're 6 minutes early." Caleb checked the wall clock, then looked toward the numbered tables. Booth 12, the place listed in Ruby's confirmation email, was occupied by a polished display of black pastry boxes bearing a gold corporate logo. Ruby tugged his sleeve. "Dad, that's our number." Harold approached with both palms open, already wearing an apologetic expression. There was a minor adjustment to improve traffic flow. Caleb looked past him toward the shadowed corner beside the equipment room door, where a folding table leaned slightly on one bent leg. A paper number 29 had been taped to its front. He did not argue. He picked up the tin and said, "Come on, Red. We'll make it work." Ruby followed, but Caleb paused beside Meredith's clipboard. Under the original floor plan, Booth 12 had been crossed out in fresh red ink, and beside Caleb Brooks's name someone had written 3 words. Sponsor visibility priority. Caleb read the red words once, then lifted his eyes to Meredith. Was this changed today? It was adjusted for traffic. Ruby's confirmation says Booth 12. Meredith's polished smile held steady while the fluorescent light caught the gold clasp of her clipboard. Behind her, volunteers carried black corporate boxes toward the center tables, filling the air with the clean sweetness of packaged vanilla and the sharper scent of industrial coffee. "Mr. Brooks," she said, lowering her voice as though offering kindness. "This event depends on sponsors. We all have to be flexible." Ruby stood close enough for Caleb to feel her shoulder against his arm. She looked from the red mark on the map to the dark corner beside the equipment room. "Did we do something wrong?" "No, Red." Caleb folded the brown apron over the dented tin. "Sometimes grown-ups move things around and forget children can. See them doing it." Meredith's fingers tightened slightly around the clipboard. "There's no need to make this personal." "I didn't." "Then we agree. We agree the table needs fixing." He carried the tin to Booth 29 without raising his voice. The corner smelled faintly of rubber mats and dust trapped behind folded bleachers. One fluorescent tube pulsed overhead, brightening and dimming in slow, tired breaths. The table leaned toward the wall, and when Ruby placed her hand-painted sign on it, a wheel shifted with a hollow metal click. Caleb caught the edge before the tin could slide. He knelt, tested each leg, then tore a square from the cardboard beneath an empty supply carton and folded it twice. His work shoes creaked against the waxed floor as he pushed the cardboard under the bent leg. The table settled. "Level?" Ruby asked. Caleb placed a small sugar packet near the center. Stayed still. "Level enough to tell the truth." Ruby carefully unpacked the orange cardamom squares. Several had shifted when the table moved, leaving pale frosting smeared against the wax paper. Caleb took a butter knife from his roll, warmed it beneath a cup of hot water, dried the blade and smoothed each damaged edge with patient strokes. At the next booth, a woman in pearls glanced at his flower-marked sleeves. "Is he one of the custodians?" she whispered. Her companion looked toward the old tin. "No. I think that's the father who still owes activity fees." The words were quiet. They were also meant to travel. Ruby's hand stopped above the recipe card inside its clear sleeve. Caleb saw her hear them. He moved the card farther from the edge of the table, then placed the brightest square in front of her painted sign. "Which one would your mom have chosen?" he asked. Ruby studied the tray. "The crooked one." "Why?" She said perfect food makes people nervous. A faint smile touched Caleb's face. "Then the crooked one gets the best spot." Harold Finch approached before Ruby could set it down. His tie carried tiny blue school emblems, and his expression held the practiced sympathy of a man accustomed to delivering unpleasant decisions as favors. "Caleb, may I have a private word?" "Ruby stays with me." Harold glanced at the child, then softened his voice further. "Of course. I only wanted to remind you that her activity account still has an outstanding balance. We've been very patient." A nearby conversation faded. Paper plates stopped rustling. Ruby lowered her eyes to the tray. "I sent half on Friday," Caleb said. "The office confirmed it. Half is not the full amount." "I know what half means." Harold gave a small, regretful nod. "Then you understand why the school must prioritize families and partners who are current on their commitments." Caleb's jaw shifted once, but his hands remained steady. He took Ruby's crooked square and straightened the paper beneath it. "Her account has nothing to do with where you put a bake sale table." "No one said it did. You said it while standing beside the table." Harold's smile disappeared for less than a second. Then Meredith stepped in, placing one hand lightly on his sleeve. "Let's not create a scene in front of the children." Caleb looked around at the adults who had turned to watch, then down at Ruby, who was pressing the plastic sleeve against her chest. "I agree," he said. "Children shouldn't have to hear adults use their lunch accounts to decide how much respect their parents deserve." No one answered. From the center aisle, Victoria Lane had stopped beside a display of frosted cupcakes. She did not know Caleb's name yet, and nothing in her face suggested she believed his side. But she had watched him move a hot cord away from a first grader, repair another booth's spilled water before touching his own table, and protect Ruby without asking the room to pity him. Her gaze dropped to Meredith's clipboard. The original floor plan still showed Brooks at booth 12 beneath the sponsor banner. The replacement number had been written in red ink that looked fresh enough to shine. Then Meredith turned toward Harold and whispered, too softly for Ruby but not softly enough for Victoria. "Nathan asked us to keep this table out of sponsor traffic." Victoria kept her eyes on Meredith after the whisper ended, but Meredith had already turned back toward the center aisle, her professional smile restored before anyone else could notice it had slipped. Caleb had not heard Nathan's name. He was crouched beside Ruby, helping her slide the recipe card back into the clear sleeve after one corner caught against the plastic seam. His thumb passed gently over the triangular tear near the top, then stopped at the cinnamon stain along the lower edge. For a moment, the noise of the gym seemed to move farther away. Hannah used to leave that card beside the stove, close enough to catch flour, butter, and whatever Ruby had spilled while reaching for a mixing spoon. Caleb remembered telling her they should copy it onto clean paper. Hannah had laughed and said clean recipes belong to people who never cooked. "Dad?" Ruby asked. He blinked and sealed the sleeve. "Still here." He placed the card beneath the dented tin, away from passing elbows, then noticed a little boy at the neighboring booth, staring at a puddle spreading beneath a tipped lemonade dispenser. The child's mother was busy arguing with a volunteer over raffle tickets. Caleb crossed the narrow aisle, unplugged a power strip before the liquid reached it, and used his red and white kitchen towel to stop the spill. "I'm sorry," the boy whispered. "I bumped it. Then you helped us find the problem before someone slipped." Caleb set the empty dispenser upright and handed the boy 2 dry napkins. "That's not the same thing as ruining the day." No one applauded. The mother barely looked up before pulling the child away. Caleb returned to his own booth with the towel darkened and dripping, wrung it over a trash can, then folded it across the back of his chair. Meredith watched from beside Harold. "He's very good at looking useful," she murmured. Harold adjusted his tie. "Let's keep things moving." Their dismissal was soft enough to sound harmless, but Victoria heard it. She also saw Caleb count the remaining pastries. 4 were cracked. 2 had lost their frosting. Only 1 square still had clean edges and the thin amber glaze Hannah's card called for. Ruby had placed a small paper star beside it. "That one's yours," she said. "You didn't eat breakfast." Caleb looked at the square, then at the envelope partly visible in his apron pocket. The landlord's notice inside had been folded so many times the crease had gone white. Friday's bakery shift would cover most of the rent, but the ingredients on that table had come from money meant for groceries. He touched the paper star with 1 flour-dusted finger. "We'll split it later." Across the gym, Victoria gripped the back of a folding chair. The fluorescent lights sharpened, then blurred. She had skipped breakfast before the sponsor review and told herself coffee would be enough. Now the room felt too warm, the voices too distant. She sat before her knees could betray her. Caleb noticed because he had spent years watching Ruby for the quiet signs children gave before admitting they were hurt. He picked up the last intact square. Before moving, he met Ruby's eyes and tilted the plate slightly. She looked at the paper star, then at Victoria's pale face. After a moment, Ruby nodded. Caleb carried the pastry and a paper cup of water toward the stranger in the navy coat. "You should eat something." Victoria straightened, embarrassed. "I'm fine." "You're trying very hard to look fine. I can pay." She opened her wallet and held out a $20 bill. Caleb set the plate on the chair beside her but did not touch the money. "I know you can. Then take it. Right now, you need food more than I need a sale." The gym lights buzzed overhead. Nearby, someone tore tape from a cardboard sign, and the sound cracked through the brief silence between them. Victoria studied his worn work shoes, the old burn mark across his wrist, and the careful distance he kept so she would not feel cornered. Ruby approached and peeled the paper star from the plate. She pressed it onto the side of the water cup. "That means it's the best one," she explained. Caleb gave her a tired smile. "Your mother would have saved it for us." Ruby shrugged with the practical generosity of a 9-year-old. "She would have given it away too." Meredith glanced toward them and leaned close to Harold. "He's handing out free samples now. He'll do anything for sympathy." Victoria heard that as well, but she said nothing. She lifted the pastry, took 1 bite, and froze. Brown butter reached her first, then cardamom warmed by residual heat, then orange arriving late instead of sharp. It was the company's best-selling flavor, but older somehow, softer and more exact. Her eyes moved past Caleb to the corner table, where the clear sleeve beneath the dented tin caught the fluorescent light and revealed a single red correction on Hannah Brooks's stained recipe card. Caleb's kindness had brought the flavor to her, but that red line might explain where her company had found it. Victoria lowered the pastry slowly, but the flavor did not leave her. "Who made this?" "I did." "From whose formula?" Caleb's expression changed, not with guilt, but with the guarded stillness of a man who had learned that certain questions could take more than they gave. Around them, the bake sale continued in fragments. Paper plates sliding across tables, children laughing near the raffle wheel, fluorescent tubes humming above the polished gym floor. Victoria looked again toward the clear plastic sleeve beneath the dented tin. "May I see the card?" Caleb did not move at first. "Why?" "Because this tastes very close to something my company sells." The word company made Ruby glance at her father. Meredith, who had drifted within hearing distance, stepped forward with renewed purpose. "I knew there was something questionable about those," she said softly. "We should probably stop serving them until the school understands what we're dealing with." Caleb kept his eyes on Victoria. "Are you accusing me of something?" "I'm checking whether there is something to accuse," she replied. It was not warm, but it was honest. She knew recipes could be reverse engineered. She knew former employees carried techniques between kitchens. She also knew memory made grieving families certain of things that documents could not always prove. Caleb reached beneath the tin and lifted the sleeve by its clean edges. He did not hand it over. Instead, he moved it beneath the brighter fluorescent strip above the aisle, where the blue handwriting became clearer through the scratched plastic. "You can look," he said. "It stays with Ruby." The card was old enough for the paper to have softened. Around the folds, a triangular piece was missing from the upper corner. Cinnamon had darkened the bottom edge, and beside the ingredient list, red ink corrected one line. 2 teaspoons orange zest, not 1. Victoria's breathing slowed. She had seen a cropped scan in an internal product history presentation months earlier, an image too incomplete to show a name or date. It had contained a dark lower edge and what might have been a torn corner. At the time, no one had questioned it. Ruby leaned closer. "That tear was already there when Mom put it in the blue box." Caleb looked down at her. "You remember that? You said I tried to eat the corner when I was little." The tension in his face eased for half a second. "That does sound like you." Victoria tilted the sleeve just enough to catch the light. At the bottom, beneath Hannah Brooks's signature, was the date, May 14, 2016. Her company's orange cardamom product had not reached stores until the following year. That did not prove theft. A date could be added. A family story could harden around coincidence. But it was enough to make the flavor in her mouth feel less familiar and more dangerous. "How did your wife develop it?" she asked. Caleb looked toward the far wall, where the school mascot had been painted above folded bleachers. "She tested it for years, sold it at church tables, school fundraisers, anywhere people would give an unknown baker a chance. Here, once, Ruby was still a baby. Angela Brown, arranging books at the literacy booth, heard him. What year? Spring of 2016. Angela wiped her hands on her skirt and frowned toward the office hallway. The school archived the old reading night newsletters. There may be photographs. Meredith's smile tightened. Those records are hardly official evidence. No one called them evidence, Caleb said. Not yet. Victoria took out her phone and photographed only the visible front of the card. When she shifted to capture the date, Caleb covered the reverse side with 2 fingers. There's a note from Hannah back there. I need the full document. You need what proves the recipe. You don't need what my wife wrote to her daughter. Victoria studied him, surprised less by the refusal than by its calmness. He was frightened. She could see it in the way his thumb pressed against the plastic. But he would not trade every private thing he owned merely because a stranger spoke with authority. She stepped away and typed a short message to corporate counsel. Preserve all development records related to Orange Cardamom line. No deletions. No modifications. Do not notify brand leadership yet. She had barely sent it when a man in a charcoal suit entered the gym beside Harold Finch. Nathan Cole moved with the polished urgency of someone accustomed to arriving after decisions had already been made. His gaze passed over Victoria, found Caleb's corner table, then landed on the sleeve in Ruby's hands. He stopped, only for a breath. Then his expression settled into professional concern. There it is, he said. Caleb's eyes narrowed. There what is? Nathan approached, adjusting one cuff. The trial card. The gym noise seemed to thin around them. Victoria slipped her phone into her coat pocket. Caleb placed one hand lightly over the sleeve without taking it from Ruby. "What trial?" he asked. Nathan's eyes flicked toward Victoria, and in that half-second of silence, the old-school archive finished loading on Angela Brown's tablet. A blurred newsletter image appeared beneath her thumb. Hannah Brooks holding a red-haired baby beside a tray labeled Orange Cardamom Squares, dated 4 days before the card in Ruby's hands had ever entered Nathan Cole's test kitchen. Angela enlarged the archive newsletter until the pixels broke into pale squares, but the date beneath the photograph remained clear. May 15, 2016. Hannah Brooks stood behind a school table with a red-haired baby balanced on one hip and a handwritten sign beside her tray. Hannah's Orange Cardamom Squares. Nathan looked at the screen, then toward the recipe card in Ruby's hands. "An old photograph proves she baked something," he said. "It does not prove she created what our company later developed." "Then why did you call it a trial card?" Caleb asked. Nathan's mouth held its courteous shape. "A reasonable assumption. You used the word before anyone mentioned a test kitchen." A chair stopped scraping across the gym floor. The whispers nearest the booth faded, leaving the hum of the ventilation system suddenly loud above them. Nathan adjusted his cuff again. "Mr. Brooks, I understand this is emotional. That is exactly why we should avoid turning a misunderstanding into a public spectacle." Caleb looked down at Ruby. Her shoulders had lowered slightly after seeing her mother's picture, but she still held the plastic sleeve against her chest as if someone might take it. "She isn't a spectacle," he said, "and neither was her mother." Mark Russell had been watching from the demonstration table near the center aisle. At 52, he had the broad hands and heat-marked forearms of a man who had spent most of his life beside ovens. He stepped closer, studying the pastry on Victoria's plate. "There's a way to test part of this," he said. Nathan turned toward him. "Taste is subjective. Timing isn't." Mark pointed to 2 stainless steel prep cups, a portable burner, and the spices arranged for his scheduled baking demonstration. "Your company's public recipe blooms cardamom over direct heat. Mr. Brooks says Hannah used residual heat. We can compare the results without touching the original card." Caleb shook his head once. "I'm not doing a contest." "It isn't one," Mark said. "It only tells us whether you know the process you described." Nathan gave a restrained smile. "Or whether he studied our product closely enough to imitate it." Ruby's fingers tightened. Caleb saw the fear return to her face. Not fear of a lawsuit she could not understand, but fear that adults had decided her father's hands belonged to a dishonest man. He looked at Mark. "Move the burner away from the aisle." Mark did. Caleb taped the power cord flat, placed Ruby behind the blue safety line, and checked that the nearest children were several feet away. Only then did he roll up his sleeves. Mark heated equal portions of butter in 2 cups. One followed the company's published instructions. Caleb watched the second without reaching for it. The foam tightened, the milk solids darkened, and a scent like toasted hazelnuts moved through the warm gym air. "Now," Caleb said quietly. Mark removed the cup from the flame. Caleb added the crushed cardamom, waited through 3 slow breaths, then stirred once. He did not look at the stained card. He did not look at Nathan. When the heat softened, he added orange zest. The fragrance rose later than it had from the first cup. Less sharp, deeper, carrying the same warm finish Victoria had tasted in the pastry. Mark closed his eyes for a moment. "That's it." Nathan folded his arms. "That proves he can cook. It proves the method he described produces the commercial flavor more accurately than the method your company publishes," Victoria said. "It still does not establish ownership." Her caution made Nathan relax by a fraction. She had not chosen Caleb's side. Not yet. Mark looked toward the newsletter image. "I saw that process once before, at an applicant test in 2016. Nathan's gaze snapped to him. "Memory after 10 years is unreliable." "So is confidence," Mark replied. "When it arrives before the question." Nathan stepped closer to Ruby. "The safest course is for the school to hold the card until our legal department reviews it." Caleb moved between them without touching him. No, you may be preserving evidence improperly. Then document it where it is. You are making this difficult. I'm keeping a stranger from taking something out of my daughter's hands. Nathan's voice remained level, but a small pulse moved beneath his jaw. Hannah was never supposed to keep the original. Silence settled again, heavier this time. Victoria placed her plate on the table. How would you know what she was supposed to keep? Nathan's face changed for less than a second. Then he reached inside his leather portfolio and removed a formal warning letter addressed to Caleb Brooks. Because the company has procedures, and Mr. Brooks is now required to stop distributing this product while we investigate. Caleb accepted the paper but did not unfold it in front of Ruby. Angela, could she sit with you for a minute? Ruby looked up at him. Are you in trouble? I'm reading before I answer. That's all. When Angela led her toward the literacy booth, Victoria took the letter from Caleb's open hand and examined the document number in the footer. You should know who I am before this goes further, she said. Nathan went still. Victoria removed a plain visitor badge from inside her coat and turned it outward. Victoria Lane, Chief Executive Officer. The color drained from Harold Finch's face. Meredith lowered her clipboard. Victoria called corporate counsel and read the document number aloud. Her eyes remained on Nathan while she waited. Then the attorney answered, and Victoria's expression hardened. The warning letter accusing Caleb of copying the company's recipe had not been created after Nathan entered the gym. Its system record showed it had been drafted at 9:42 the previous night. The warning letter had been drafted at 9:42 the previous night, 12 hours before Nathan claimed he had first seen Caleb's pastries. Victoria read the timestamp twice. The gym's ventilation system clicked off, and for several seconds the silence felt mechanical, as if even the building had stopped to listen. Who told you he would be here? She asked. Nathan closed his portfolio with careful hands. The school submitted a vendor list. A vendor list does not explain a legal accusation prepared before inspection. It was a precautionary template. Addressed to Caleb Brooks? Nathan's jaw tightened. We should discuss internal procedure privately. Caleb looked toward the literacy booth, where Ruby sat beside Angela coloring the edge of a paper bookmark. Nothing involving my daughter's name gets handled by pretending this didn't happen in front of her. He did not demand that Nathan be removed. He did not raise the letter above his head for the parents to see. Instead, he folded it along its existing crease and placed it beneath the dented tin, preserving the document before anger could turn it into theater. 3 days later, the evidence began arriving in layers. Victoria ordered a legal hold on the Orange Cardamom product files and brought in outside counsel to review them. The company's glass conference room smelled of copier heat and black coffee when Angela sent the archived school newsletter. On the screen, Hannah Brooks stood behind a fundraiser table in May 2016, Ruby still a baby against her shoulder, the handwritten sign clearly reading Hannah's Orange Cardamom squares. The school server timestamp had never been altered. It proved the pastry existed before the company launched its version, but not how the recipe had entered corporate hands. Then the sponsorship emails surfaced. Meredith had sent Nathan the complete booth list 48 hours before the bake sale. When he saw Caleb's last name and the pastry description, he replied to Harold, "Keep that table away from sponsor traffic. I'll handle it in person." Victoria leaned back slowly. The blue light of the monitor reflected across her face. The humiliation had not begun with a crooked table. It had been anticipated. Nathan arrived 10 minutes later and asked that Caleb be removed from the review room because he was an emotionally involved claimant. Victoria refused. He is the person your letter threatened. That does not make him qualified to interpret corporate records. Caleb rested both hands on the table. I'm not interpreting them. I'm listening while you explain why you knew my name. Nathan dabbed one thumb along the edge of his phone, then turned it face down. We should not confuse poor judgment at a school event with theft. No one has, Victoria said. We are checking whether one led to the other. Human Resources produced Hannah's Test Kitchen check-in from May 19, 2016. Beneath it lay a standard sample submission form bearing her typed name. The transfer clause was present. The consent box was empty. There was no signature. Nathan insisted the policy applied automatically. Outside counsel disagreed. Without acknowledgement, the document did not establish that Hannah had surrendered ownership or confidentiality. Caleb said nothing for a long moment. The paper lay beneath the conference room lights, clean and official, except for the space where his wife's consent should have been. That empty line hurt more than Nathan's accusation. Hannah had died believing the company rejected her because she lacked talent. She had never known that something she created might have continued without her name. Caleb reached into the dented tin he had carried from home and removed. An old phone wrapped in the red and white kitchen towel. Its screen was scratched, its battery swollen enough that the investigators connected it through a protected reader. He had kept it because Hannah's voice remained inside. When the voicemail played, static filled the room before her quiet words emerged. Nathan kept the card so his team could look it over. He said they weren't hiring me. I'll pick it up tomorrow. The recording ended with the faint sound of Ruby crying as a baby and Hannah whispering that she was coming. Caleb lowered his head but did not ask anyone to stop the playback. Victoria listened again, comparing the date to the HR record. Nathan shifted in his chair. A voicemail is not a contract. No, Caleb said. It tells us she expected the card back. The company offered him a confidential payment that afternoon. Enough to cover years of rent, Ruby's school costs, and every debt he had folded into his apron pocket. The agreement withdrew the warning but did not restore Hannah's name or admit wrongdoing. Caleb read every page, then pushed it back. This makes the problem quiet, he said. It doesn't make it right. That evening, the server audit found a scanned image uploaded through Nathan's account 2 days after Hannah's test. The scan carried the same torn corner, the same cinnamon-darkened edge, and the same red correction as Ruby's card. Nathan claimed an assistant might have used his credentials. Then the audit showed the file had been renamed, moved into product development, and opened repeatedly from Nathan's office before the first commercial trial. By sunset, parents had learned about the warning letter. The school board had requested answers and Claire Evans had begun calling the district. Victoria looked through the conference room glass at Caleb holding Hannah's old phone in both hands. We cannot settle this privately anymore, she said. Caleb wrapped the phone again and stood. Then take it back to the room where they called me a thief. 1 week later, the elementary school gym no longer smelled of frosting. It smelled of floor wax, damp coats, and coffee cooling in paper cups as parents filled the folding chairs beneath the same fluorescent lights that had watched Caleb Brooks be called a thief. A long table stood beneath the basketball scoreboard. School board members sat at one end, corporate counsel at the other. Claire Evans occupied a chair near the aisle with her recorder resting unopened on her notebook. Caleb entered without his apron, wearing the same cream shirt and worn work shoes. He carried Hannah's dented tin beneath one arm. Ruby walked beside him until Angela Brown met them at the front row. You stay with Ms. Brown, Caleb said. Can I still hold the card? Until they need to examine it. Ruby nodded and pressed the clear sleeve to her chest. Victoria Lane stood behind the long table but did not call the meeting to order. She watched Nathan Cole arrange his papers into a perfect stack, watched Harold Finch smooth his tie and Meredith Collins greet board members, as though this were another fundraiser requiring careful manners. Nathan spoke first. His voice was measured, almost regretful. He described the incident as an unfortunate conflict between a grieving family and a company obligated to protect a commercially valuable product. He acknowledged that the warning letter had been drafted early, but called it a standard preventive measure prepared after receiving the vendor list. No one intended to shame Mr. Brooks, he said. Our goal was simply to prevent confusion while ownership was reviewed through proper channels. Several parents shifted. The explanation was calm enough to sound possible. Then Nathan placed a copy of the company's sample submission policy on the table. Applicants were informed that materials presented during testing could be retained for evaluation. Mrs. Brooks participated voluntarily. For a moment, the room seemed to tilt back toward him. Legal language filled the screen behind the table. Harold released a breath. Meredith folded her hands. Caleb remained standing near the aisle. "Was this the form Hannah signed?" he asked. "It was the policy in effect." "That wasn't my question." The projector fan whirred above the silence. Victoria finally stepped forward. "Show the signature page." Corporate counsel changed the slide. Hannah Brooks's typed. Name appeared above an empty consent box. No signature rested beneath it. A murmur moved through the chairs. Nathan did not flinch. Administrative omissions happen. Her participation and submission established implied consent. "Not according to your own legal department," Victoria said. She did not sound angry. That made the words heavier. Ruby looked up at Caleb from beside Angela. He gave her a small nod. Not victory, only reassurance. The recipe card was placed on the evidence table inside its plastic sleeve. Its torn corner faced the room. Victoria introduced the archive school newsletter next, not as proof of theft, but as an independent timestamp. Hannah appeared on the gym wall, holding baby Ruby beside a tray labeled Hannah's Orange Cardamom Squares in May 2016. Then came the test kitchen check-in dated 4 days later. Nathan answered smoothly. "That establishes chronology, not misconduct." Similar recipes often emerge independently. It was his strongest explanation yet, and several board members wrote it down. Caleb could have interrupted. He could have played Hannah's voicemail immediately and watched Nathan struggle. Instead, he glanced toward Ruby and waited for Victoria to follow the evidence in order. "This isn't about making him hurt," Caleb said when Harold asked why the family had refused a private settlement. "It's about making sure her name isn't buried because silence was cheaper." Victoria displayed the sponsorship email next. "Keep that table away from sponsor traffic. I'll handle it in person." Harold's face tightened. Meredith leaned toward her microphone. "That was a logistical decision. The company's display required visibility, and I acted to protect school funding." "You moved us before anyone inspected the food," Caleb said. "Mr. Brooks, we were trying to avoid disruption. You created it before we arrived." The second retention spike moved through the room without applause. The warning letter's creation time appeared beside the email timestamp, 9:42 the night before the bake sale. Nathan's explanation began to narrow. He said the letter was a template. He said an assistant could have prepared it. He said his account credentials were used by multiple staff members in 2016. Then Victoria brought out the sealed evidence envelope containing a copy of the R&D scan. She did not open it. Instead, she placed Hannah's card face down on the table and asked Ruby one simple question. "Was the red writing already on your mother's card when you brought it here?" Ruby nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Dad said Mom changed one number." Nathan looked toward the sleeve. "The red correction has no legal significance." Victoria's hand stopped above the envelope. No one had read the correction aloud. No image showing it had been placed on the screen. She slid a blank index card and a pen toward Nathan. "Then write down exactly what you believe that red correction says." Nathan stared at the pen. The room waited. Finally, he wrote 4 words and a number, folded the card once, and pushed it across the polished table. Victoria placed his answer beside Hannah's still-hidden recipe, then reached for the sealed envelope containing the final server record. Victoria broke the seal and drew out the final server audit. The paper made a dry whisper against the envelope, loud enough to carry through the motionless gym. She opened Nathan's folded index card first. In his own handwriting were 4 words and a number, 2 teaspoons orange zest. Then she turned Hannah's recipe face up beneath the projector. The red correction appeared across the wall behind them. 2 teaspoons orange zest. Not one. No one moved. Nathan's pen rolled from his fingers, struck the polished tabletop, and fell to the floor. Victoria did not look at him yet. She placed the server audit beside the recipe card and began with the dates. Hannah's card was signed May 14, 2016. The school newsletter showed her serving the same orange cardamom squares the following day. The company check-in placed her inside Nathan's test kitchen on May 19th. The transfer form carried her typed name but no signature, No checked consent box and no written authorization for the company to keep her work. The projector fan hummed. Somewhere near the bleachers, a child's jacket zipper clicked and then stopped. Victoria played the voicemail from Hannah's old phone. Static filled the speakers before Hannah's. Tired voice entered the room. Nathan kept the card so his team could look it over. He said they weren't hiring me. I'll pick it up tomorrow. Ruby reached for Caleb's hand. He closed his fingers around hers without looking away from the table. Nathan swallowed. That message does not establish what happened afterward. His voice had lost its smoothness, but the argument remained possible. Victoria nodded once. That is why we preserved the system records. The server audit appeared on the screen. A scan containing the same triangular tear, the same cinnamon-darkened edge, and the same red handwritten correction had been uploaded 2 days after Hannah's test. The login belonged to Nathan. The file had been renamed from an applicant number to a product development code, opened repeatedly from his office, and moved into the commercial trial folder months before the company's first market test. Nathan stared at the screen. My credentials were accessible to staff. The audit includes device verification, corporate counsel said. The upload, renaming, and first 3 access events came from your assigned office computer while your badge was inside the building. Claire Evans slowly switched on her recorder. No one objected. Victoria brought up the sponsorship email next. Nathan had seen Caleb's name and the pastry description before the bake sale. He had told Harold and Meredith to keep the Brooks table away from sponsor traffic. The warning letter had been drafted that same night, before Nathan entered the gym, before he tasted the pastry, and before he publicly claimed the family had copied the company. You did not arrive to investigate, Victoria said. You arrived prepared to silence the people who still had the original. Nathan's hand rested flat on the table, but his fingertips trembled against the wood. He looked toward Harold, then Meredith, then the sealed evidence envelope, as though one of them might still offer another explanation. None did. Victoria turned to the board. Effective immediately, Nathan Cole is suspended from all duties. His system access is revoked. His devices and project compensation records will be preserved for independent investigation and legal review. She faced Caleb and Ruby. The cease and desist letter is withdrawn. The company acknowledges that it had no verified basis to accuse Caleb Brooks of copying this product. Harold lowered his head. Meredith's clipboard slipped against her chair and struck the floor with a hollow slap. Victoria continued, her voice quiet enough that the room had to lean toward it. This company is not being robbed today. We are looking at evidence that it took a woman's work, removed her name, and then used its money to threaten the family who remembered her. The project code vanished from the screen. In its place appeared 3 words: original creator, Hannah Brooks. The room went so still that Caleb could hear Ruby's breath catch beside him and the faint electric buzz inside the fluorescent lights. He knelt until they were eye to eye. Mom wasn't bad at baking? Ruby whispered. Caleb shook his head. No, Red. Someone knew exactly how good she was. He did not look toward Nathan when he stood again. There was no satisfaction in his face, only exhaustion and the steadiness that had carried him through every insult without letting Ruby become a weapon. Victoria asked what the Brooks family wanted entered into the formal remedy. Caleb placed Hannah's recipe card flat on the table between them. Clear my name, he said. Put hers back where it belongs. And never let the school use a child's unpaid balance to decide how much respect their family deserves. The first movement in the room was not applause. It was Harold removing his microphone from its stand because he could not yet find words worthy of it. Justice had begun. But as Victoria opened the settlement folder and asked Caleb what he intended to do with the power the truth had finally given him, every eye in the gym turned toward the single father who had never asked to become powerful at all. The folding chairs emptied slowly after the hearing, their metal legs whispering across the gym floor where no one seemed willing to speak above a murmur. Nathan Cole left through a side door with corporate counsel, his access badge already disabled and his company devices placed under preservation orders. Harold. Finch remained beside the silent microphone, while Meredith Collins gathered the clipboard she had once used to move the Brooks family into a corner. Caleb did not watch either of them leave. He helped Ruby slide Hannah's recipe card back into its clear sleeve, then carried the dented tin home beneath one arm. Justice did not arrive all at once after that. It came through signed findings, corrected records, and difficult meetings held beneath ordinary office lights. The independent investigation concluded that Nathan had taken Hannah's submission without valid consent, removed her name from the development history, and received bonuses tied to the product that followed. His employment was terminated. The company froze the disputed compensation, referred the records for civil review, and began auditing other products developed under the same leadership. The warning against Caleb was formally withdrawn, and every copy of the accusation in the school and company systems was marked unsupported. Months later, the gym smelled of warm butter again. This time, the tables were not ranked by sponsor value. A new policy prohibited staff from discussing a child's unpaid balance in public, and meal assistants no longer required colored cards, separate lines, or any mark that could tell classmates who needed help. Harold stood before the parents and apologized without asking Caleb to make the apology easier for him. He remained principal under board supervision, required to publish sponsorship decisions and complete regular reviews of student dignity policies. Meredith lost control of event placement and parent association funds. She could still volunteer, but no longer decide which families deserved the center of the room. Victoria Lane stood beside the reopened bake sale table, not with a ceremonial check but with the first corrected package from the company. Beneath the product name, in plain lettering, were the words, "Original recipe created by Hannah Brooks, 2016. We would like you to represent the brand," she told Caleb. He looked at the polished box, then toward Ruby, who was arranging paper stars beside a tray. "Hannah should represent the recipe. And you, I'll keep making sure people are fed." Victoria nodded. She had learned not to mistake refusal for ingratitude. The company signed a retroactive licensing and compensation agreement with the Brooks family, but Caleb's first request was not for a larger house or a public title. He established the Hannah Brooks School Lunch Fund under one condition: help had to be quiet. No public debt lists, no different trays, no child sent to a separate window. The fund would protect privacy before it protected anyone's image. Caleb kept his bakery shifts and agreed to teach one free family baking class each month. He arrived in his brown apron, carrying the same dented tin that had once made parents assume he did not belong beside the sponsor tables. Now no one mistook its worn edges for failure. It held measuring spoons, the red and white towel, and Hannah's recipe card inside a hinged frame that could be opened whenever Caleb and Ruby needed it. On the morning of the first breakfast program, Ruby lifted the frame carefully. "Can I take it out?" she asked. "Clean hands." She displayed both palms. "Mostly." Caleb smiled and released the latch. Together they placed the stained card on the work table. The triangular tear was still missing. The cinnamon mark remained at the bottom. The red correction had not become cleaner or more impressive now that lawyers and executives had confirmed its value. It was still what it had always been: a working note from a mother trying to make something better. Children entered without being asked to explain why they were hungry. Caleb cut the warm orange cardamom squares into even portions while Ruby added a paper star to the final tray. Harold carried boxes without giving instructions. Victoria poured milk. Angela welcomed families by name but never checked them against a list. For a moment, the room became quiet, not the stunned silence that had followed Nathan's exposure, but the softer silence of people understanding what had nearly been lost. Ruby watched a boy take a second square without lowering his eyes. "Do you think Mom knows they put her name back?" she whispered. Caleb looked at Hannah's card, then at the children eating beneath the steady, fluorescent light. She'd care more that nobody had to be ashamed to eat. He returned to the tray before anyone could applaud, flour resting on his hands like pale dust, because dignity had never needed the loudest place in the room, and kindness had only been waiting for the truth to give it somewhere to go.